Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great today. A viewer suggested that I cover a game played by Levon Aronian from the 2018 Tata Steel in Wijk. I realized that Aronian didn't play in this year's edition, so I have decided to cover a game from last year's edition. So in this game, Aronian had white pieces against Anish Giri. Aronian opens with d4. And we have a sort of Nimzo Indian structure on the board, where Aronian plays g3 to fianchetto his kingside bishop. Bishop b4 check played by Giri, bishop to d2, and bishop back to e7. It seems strange wasting a tempo only to retreat back to e7, but black is trying to justify this by saying that white's bishop on d2 is not ideally placed. Bishop g2 from Aronian, black castles, white castles as well, c6, knight to a3, so preparing to recapture here on c4 and allowing black the opportunity to take on a3 and mess up white's structure. Giri plays knight b to d7, rook to c1, knight to e4, and bishop to e3 from Aronian, keeping his bishop pair. And now Giri decides to take on a3. And knight to d6, trying to entice white to play c5. So if white takes on d5, then this e takes d5 opens up the light square bishop. So Aronian plays c5, knight c4 from Giri, and we reached a critical position. Do you allow the knight to remain on this very nice square? Do you play something like queen to b3, or do you sack the exchange on c4? So here Aronian chooses the latter. Rook takes c4. And queen to c2, preparing to recapture. h6 played by Giri. Queen takes c4. White definitely has compensation here with the two bishops. Black has troubles of his own trying to develop this light square bishop. Also, the rooks don't have any open lines to operate with. So here, probably something like e5 for black would be ideal, giving up another pawn. But at least here black can somehow solve his problematic bishop. Maybe with maneuvers like this, knight to f8, then the bishop can come to e6. So instead of playing e5, in this position Giri played b6. This weakens this c6 pawn, giving white a very juicy target for his light square bishop. Giri wants to bring the bishop to b7, but that is still locked in by the pawn on c6. So maybe he should have played the move e5 here. Aronian plays bishop to f4, getting ready to plant the bishop on d6. Rook to e8 played, bishop to d6, bishop b7, and knight to e5, putting more pressure on c6. So perhaps better for Giri was to play this knight takes e5, and then rook e7 to secure the bishop. So at least in this position, black's structure is still somewhat intact on the queen side. Instead, in the game, after knight to e5, b takes c5 played, which further weakens black's structure. So here d takes c5, knight takes, bishop takes, then a5, excuse me, from Giri, preparing maybe to play bishop to a6. Aronian now activates his rook, rook to b1, and now Giri plays a rook to a7. So if he tried bishop to a6, then after the queen retreats, queen to c2, then white is threatening to go bishop takes c6. So if queen d7, then a4, not allowing moves like a4 from black and bishop to b5 to block the file. So after this move a4, black is pretty tied down here. There are no open lines for the rooks. This b8 square is covered by the bishop. Also, white can always stick a bishop back on d6 to close the open d file. So here, if after queen to c2, let's say rook to c8, trying to defend c6, then here rook to b6, attacking the bishop. So the rook pretty much has to go back to a8. But here bishop takes c6, white wins back the exchange, and he has a very nice position with a strong pass pawn on c5. So here, rook to a7 played by Giri, queen to c3, looking at g7. So here Giri played f6. If he tried g6, then white can go bishop to h8, preparing queen g7 mate. Then black pretty much has to play e5, then take king h7. So now white has 2 pawns for the exchange, and a very nice initiative against the king as well. So here, another alternative, instead of going g6, is to play queen to g5, which, with the idea of not playing f6 because that would slightly weaken black's king. But Giri didn't go for this, perhaps because after bishop to e4, which takes away the square from the queen, black is almost provoked into playing the move f6 here, which is not what he wants in this position. So for example, if he goes bishop to a8, then here white can play f4, and then h3, deflecting the queen off the defense of g7. So here bishop takes g7, and if f5, then just bishop back to g2, queen g4. So bishop was attacked, so it comes to e5. So white is going to play king f2, bring the other rook possibly to h1. A very promising position for white. If black decides to get greedy here and play queen takes e2, then white gets very active play after bishop f3, queen a6, then bishop to h5, attacking the rook. There are also ideas of playing bishop back to d6 to allow the queen in. So this probably didn't appeal to Giri, queen g5, because you have to play f6 anyway. So it's probably why he played the move f6 immediately here. Then bishop to d6 from Aronian, and bishop to a8 from Giri, opening up the rook's defense. Bishop e4 played by Aronian, threatening to go bishop to g6. So Giri stops that with the move f5. He could also play queen d7 here. This is another possibility to give the rook more flight squares on d8 and c8. But Giri played f5. Bishop back to c2, and rook to b7. Logical move, trying to trade down to reduce white's pressure in the position. Aronian correctly keeps the tension by playing rook to d1. So now lining up with the queen, rook to d7 from Giri, and now Aronian tries to tear open the position for his bishop by playing e4. So taking would pretty much give white what he wants, which is the open diagonal for the bishop. It also leaves black with a very big weakness on e6. So here queen to f6 from Giri. Aronian correctly declines the queen trade. He plays queen to c4, pinning the pawn. Now threatening this e takes f5, so king to h8, stepping out of the pin. And rook to e1, renewing the threat of e takes f5, because now this rook is pinned. So queen to f7 played, and now queen to d3, forming a very deadly queen-bishop battery. Also renewing this threat, e takes f5. So now f4 was played. For illustration purposes, let's say what happens if this is allowed. Then here takes, queen takes, threatening mate here on h7. And this is already looking pretty hopeless for black. If g6, then just bishop e5, rook g7, queen to f6, queen d7 defending. But here bishop takes g6, threatening this. And I'm not going to go on, but basically white's attack here is too strong. So here after queen d3, f4 played, g takes, and e5. So black is hoping that white takes on e5, then rook takes, taking advantage of this pin. And this rook can also come to g5 in some lines. But here Aronian plays queen to h3, just calmly stepping out of the pin. And also preparing to take on e5 and play bishop b3, where white also has ideas of going e6. Giri couldn't see anything better to do in this position. He played rook takes d6, giving back the exchange. C takes d6, queen to g6 check, queen g3. So here taking would pretty much enter a losing endgame, where white has a very strong passed d-pawn. So Giri plays queen takes d6, rook to d1. Giri's position is already very difficult. He tries to get the counterplay here by playing queen to c5, attacking the bishop. So here Aronian doesn't waste any time. He plays a rook to d7, very active play. Now threatening mate on g7, so that is defended. Rook to g8. Here queen to f8. Probably a little bit better than what Giri played, but his position is still looking lost. So rook to g8, defending mate. We have bishop to b3, trying to remove the defender. So here e takes f4 from Giri, and queen to g6, maintaining the attack on g7. f3 now from Giri, trying for some back rank tricks. But Aronian plays h4, just giving the king a flight square. Queen to c3 now, threatening this queen to e1, followed by taking here on f2. But Aronian has worked out that bishop takes g8 would secure him the game. Giri tries to give checks. So here king to g4 and white king slips away. In fact, Giri resigned in this position. If queen to g2, then king to h5. Black runs out of checks. If queen takes g6 and f2, hoping to promote, well, simply bishop to f7, threatening rook d8, with no defense here for black. Really incredible game from Aronian, and he showed just how dangerous he is with the initiative. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great day.